All right, Dave Fleetwood Fabrication. Got a big pile of seats here of a 55 Chrysler. Been driving this thing quite a bit, and I really hate to pull it in and take it off the road to fix the floorboards, but they desperately need it. This poor car needs quite a bit more work. The drivetrain, brakes, steering, all the important stuff, pretty well sorted, motor. But yeah, it needs a lot of floorboard work. It's pretty drafty in there. But here's all the original seats out of it. They're pretty complete and stuff, but rough. And I got a set of Thunderbird bucket seats I think I'll put in the front. I'd rather get this front bench reupholstered, but that's out of the budget right now. Maybe someday. But here's what we're working with the floors. And as you can see, there's a lot of rat nests and grody stuff in here. I've got like the bulk of it out that I could grab by hand, but I'm getting ready to shop vac it here pretty soon. But from this brace that goes under the back seat back and over the rear end is pretty good. The rest of it, not so much. And so, especially over here, you see there's no rocker panel or anything of substantial strength over here. And there is, some floorboards in here, but they're just real thin and just crunchy. You can put your fingers through them places. You can see real good up in there. This side, the front part there, as you can see, is out of our parts car. It had a fairly decent piece right there under the pedals, and I put that in there because the gas pedal's mounted to it. And I'm going to work rearward from that and just replace all the rest here. But for right now, I'm going to get in there to the shop vac and vacuum it out. And you can see there on the tunnel too where the 727 transmission was bigger around and sticks up higher than the original. And so I just split that open. We'll have to fill in the gaps there. And we'll make a series on this one because reproduction floor pans are really expensive. And really, a lot of them aren't all that great of quality. They don't fit that great. They're thin. And so I always just make my own floorboards and transmission humps and trunk pans. I try to make them out of 16 or 18 gauge metal. And I try to get the contours and shapes and things as close as I can to the original. So if you buy carpet for the original car, it'll fit and stuff. But a lot of times when you do engine swaps or set engines back, or have your engine and transmission setting up a lot higher in the chassis because you got the car real low to the ground, different things like that, there's no choice but to make your own, and then you're just going to have to work with the carpet and upholstery later. We rarely get to that point anyway. So, but anyway, this is what it looks like now, and I'll take some more video throughout the process, and hopefully that'll help someone else out there who either has a car that you can't buy reproduction floorboards for, or doesn't want to spend that much money, or you have a different transmission, drive shaft, whatever combination that buying the reproduction floors would be useless, and you'd have to cut them up anyway. So we'll get started. Getting some floorboards going on here. Had to cut it out to where the rust pretty well stopped. As you can see, that was about 6 inches up from the bottom of the car down. Had to be replaced. So then I had to split the transmission tunnel there to make a little more room for the 727. Got some shadowing going on here. Let's try to get that out. There we go. See the exhaust pipes and everything, but I try to cut out all the really pitted and rusty stuff and weld over it, or there's some stuff like right there in that corner that's pretty bad, but I'll be welding right up next to that with the new metal, and then going from it to the new metal. And it's hard to get rid of all of the rust of a car that's this rusty, but we'll try to get rid of most of it. And you can see here, this car, you know, it's never going to be a frame off restoration or anything. So what I've basically done here is took some 1.5 by 3 tubing and went from the frame out here to the rocker. This rocker, that's a piece of 1.5 by 3 tubing laid on its side out here because the rocker was totally gone. And then I've just went from the frame out to that and just welded it all solid. And you know, all these rubber mounts and stuff on this car are pretty old and not so good anymore, so this just kind of makes it a more like a unibody. You know, weld the floor pans in, I'll tie it all together and just paint it all black. It's just a driver, it's never going to be a show car or anything, so it'll be fine. Some undercoating and sound deadener and things, and some carpet eventually maybe, or a rubber mat or something, and it's going to be great. So I get the floorboard put in there, we'll show more of that. But I just wanted to get some video here of it, just to kind of show people what you might as well do rather than patch around on floors. If they're rusty or thin or pitted real bad, you might as well just cut it all out and start over. And this one's pretty straightforward, so I'll just be taking some measurements and transferring it to some flat sheet metal and going from there. So we'll get to that later. Alright, this is the big piece of sheet metal. It's like that old Carpenter school bus metal. They used to make Carpenter school buses in Mitchell, Indiana, not far from here where I went to school. And this stuff is really good. It's like probably 18 gauge. It's galvanized on one side and painted on the other. And it welds really well. And you can't hardly cut it with 10 snips. You can, but it's rough. So I usually cut it with a cutoff wheel on a 4.5 inch grinder. And a lot of times when I do floorboards and stuff, I'll take paper and make patterns. This is pretty straightforward. I just took some measurements and cut that piece you see there in the center and ground it around the edges, and then I got to do a little more grinding inside the car and be ready to set that in there and start welding it up and filling in the gaps. So that'll be our next step. Alright, here's what we got. I got the passenger side done here. I might want to do the driver's side, do a little more in depth and details here. It's hard to get light without shadows and stuff, but this car was really rusty underneath, and the frame was good and solid though, so that's good. But I just had to come up about 6 or 8 inches all the way around pretty much. And then the transmission tunnel, I had to make it about 1.5 inches, 2 inches taller. And so when I sliced it and made it higher, then I had to fill in the gap, and then it was rusted off, you know, pretty good ways up from the bottom. And you can see right there from the factory, that tunnel was about 2 inches wider on the passenger side and the driver's side, and I didn't need it to be that way, so I evened that up. And you can kind of see there where at the back, that's still stock height tunnel, and then right there you can see where I just raised it up a little for a little extra clearance. And the reason why it looks so much taller here than on the other side is you can see the factory floor over there, what's left of it, had a raised up spot under the seat, and I'm going to put buckets in it, so I'm just going to do away with all that and make them flat. And then this brace underneath the front of the back seat was pretty solid, so I welded to that. It's pretty short in that corner there. And then the back seat, I got to put some bracing in that floor so don't plop ploop. This whole corner, and you know, a couple 3 inches up, and the lower wheel housing was all gone. So see there where I patched all that in. So this side's pretty good and solid and ready to go. So now I just gotta move on to this driver's side. And this driver's side ain't near as bad as the passenger side was. Get that light out of the way, but it's pretty bad. And when you get floors like this that are just real pitted and thin, you might as well just replace the whole thing. If I was to like patch that hole there and patch that hole there and, you know, that corner up back there, in no time it would rust somewhere else. And then you patch that and it rusts somewhere else. So you're better off just to replace it all. Any of it is thin and pitted bad, just replace it and then it'll last a long time. So they may do a little more in-depth when do that side, but it's coming right along. Okay, here's our driver's side. After I got it finished, it's still dirty and gross because it's got a bunch of grinder dirt and stuff in here where after I welded, I took a grinder and knocked the welds down a little because you're welding on this old rusty metal and dirty stuff with undercoating. You gotta scrape as much of that off as you can, but you know, it's not a real clean looking weld. So I hit that, ran it down with the grinder a little, and I got to bolt the gas pedal back to the shadow out of there, to the mount there. And that is a little tiny speck of the floorboard that I left because it holds the gas pedal and it kind of sets up off of the floor there. If you can see if we can see that, yeah. And again, you can see how far I had to go up into the car to get all the rusty part taken care of. Shoot up to the top of the door hinge over here. But now it's good and solid. And I did, let's see the transmission hump. I really probably would have been just about as well to just make a whole new transmission hump now looking back, but I did use the top and part of the front of the original transmission hump on the car. See up here where I had to split and pie shape and slice and dice on the bell housing area. And then this side wasn't near as bad under the seat, so I just had to make one little patch there to take care of that. And this side also, the rocker panel is 1.5 by 3, 120 wall tubing. And you can see that's just, you know, the main inner structure and flat part where you open the door. The, you know, bottom part and where the door fits it that you'd see from outside the car when the door is shut was shot too, and still got to make that part. That'll be a next video probably on this car. I've got a set of rocker panels for I believe it was a 2011 maybe Chevy Canyon, just some reproduction rockers for them, the slip over kind. Gonna make these rockers out of that. And they're for a 4-door truck and they're like 78 inches long and it's 96 inches from wheel to wheel on this car. So I had to buy 3 of those and they were a little over $50 a piece. So I have to put 2 of them, you know, on there, one on each side, and then cut the third one into pieces to finish it off to reach the back wheel way back here. Because it's a long car, 123 inch wheelbase. And then it's not going to be you know, a restored car or anything. It's going to be slightly customized. So I'll probably just, you know, weld the fenders to the car and fill in the seams and excuse me, not have a gap in the front fender and the rocker. I'll just make that one piece. And excuse me, kind of show you how. Let's make these pieces. This is my scribble work here, but the main big flat pieces in the floor you can see on this piece of cardboard. I just take some measurements. I put that piece of tubing in the side there so I know that's straight and square, and then up at the front, the firewall, I know that's straight across. So I just, you know, drew a little box on that piece of paper and took those 2 measurements to start with, and then
measured on the top there where the transmission hump would be and how far it would go, and I just cut that out of metal by using measurements. Didn't make a pattern for that. And then the other measurements and marker on that are for this side, because if you replace original floorboards in cars, that transmission hump is rarely the same on both sides in a factory production car, and it's rarely centered in a factory car. They're usually off to the passenger side a little, Mopars especially, and so you can't use the exact same pattern and measurements from one side or the other unless you're making all new floorboards from scratch, which is a good idea. And then you can make, each side exactly the same and center the transmission tunnel and stuff if you're making a car from scratch. But these other pieces back here I've got, grab them. These are just patterns I make. This is just some heavy paper. It's like the paper that goes on drywall. I got a whole roll of that off a guy that used to work at a place that makes drywall. And these have been trimmed and marked on to fit this driver's side, but like this one was for the passenger side first, so I had to go up a little farther on the driver's side, so I just used that pattern and added a couple inches, and then I had to make that notch over there to fit the gas pedal thing. But I'll just lay that paper down in the car and push down against it, with my fingers real tight in the corners, and it'll leave a mark on there. Or you can take a screwdriver handle or something and push it down in there and push around it, and it'll make a place on there enough that you can pull it back out and cut it with scissors. So there's that one. And then like this one would be the one that would go right here. I didn't need quite as much on this side, so you can see where I'd folded it there. And this one's probably one of them transmission hump sides. Yeah, that's probably for the other side though, but you get the idea there. And that's how I do them. Nothing fancy, just stuff we got laying around. And if you can't get that kind of paper, even like poster board would work. Cardboard boxes, even old ones, work, but cardboard's kind of hard to deal with. And then, like I say, this is old school bus metal, but you can get metal, at sheet metal places and a lot of different places. But this was gave to me by some buddies, and I'm always trying to get, stuff cheap and trade for it and things like that. So just do whatever you can do, and you don't have to have a lot of money or a bunch of reproduction parts to get these cars back on the road. If you want to put a little time and work into them, and you got a welder, then you can get them back on the road. And a lot of these cars, if they're like the stuff I work with, is usually what most people would call parts cars. Sometimes maybe not even that good. And we usually will start with a $400 to $600 car. I paid $450 for this one with a title, and then $2,500 to $3,500 tires, motor, tranny, wiring, the whole bit is what we will most of the time put in these old cars. And they're not show quality or whatever, but they're good, dependable drivers, and that's the main thing, is to just build them sturdy and where they'll hold up and be fairly safe. You don't have to have four-wheel disc brakes and the best of everything, just as long as it'll stop you dependably and get you down the highway and to the next place you want to go. And there's a lot of cars and old trucks out there that could be put back on the road if people, sometimes they get a little too picky on stuff. Well, what we always say is don't wait till you can do it right. Just do it as good as you can and get out there and drive the thing. So this one will be a lot of videos made on this car probably. So the next one will most likely be the rockers, and then we'll do the lower rear quarters and things from there. And hopefully we'll have a lot more videos of going places and doing things, because that's what they're for. Till next time.